On January 5, 2020, Saudi Arabia, along with 3 other Arab states, restored diplomatic relations with Qatar, ending the years-long blockade. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt had imposed a blockade on Qatar in June 2017, accusing it of sponsoring terrorism and destabilizing the region. It was initially thought that the blockade would severely affect tiny Qatar, but 3.5 years later, the blockade has only helped Qatar to become politically, economically, and militarily more powerful. On June 5, 2017, residents of Qatar rushed through the country's grocery stores, stocking up on as much food as they could fit into their carts or their budget. Qatar had just become the subject of a blockade by the gang of 4 Arab states popularly referred to as the Quartet. Later, countries like Mauritania, the Maldives, Senegal, Djibouti, Jordan, Libya, and Yemen also joined the anti-Qatar blockade. In addition to cutting all diplomatic ties, Qatar's only land border with Saudi Arabia was sealed. The blockading countries closed their airspace and territorial waters to all Qatari vessels and aircrafts. Furthermore, all Qatari citizens and students were expelled from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain, and their citizens living in Qatar were provided a 14-day deadline to leave Qatar. For its part, Qatar did not expel any citizens and students from the blockading countries. Prior to the blockade, Qatar was importing nearly 90% of its food, and in addition to that, nearly all its food imports were coming through the Saudi land border crossing at Salwa and by ship from the UAE's Jebel Ali port. Moreover, 40% of Qatar's food imports, mainly dairy and poultry products, came from Saudi Arabia alone. So the first challenge before the Qatari government was to ensure steady supply of essential food items for its 2.6 million residents. On the first day of the blockade, the Qatari government dispatched 2 of its C-17 Globemaster military transportation aircrafts to Turkey to load up essential consumer goods. And within 5 days of the blockade, Iran sent 5 plane loads of food and medicine to Qatar. Soon, 105 Turkish cargo planes of supplies also arrived in Qatar. However, it was neither economical nor sustainable to airlift food supplies on such a scale. Hence, Qatar had to work out new shipping routes to import food items by sea. At that time, bigger container ships were unable to dock at ports in Qatar due to its shallow waters. Hence, Qatar was using Middle East's busiest port, the Jebel Ali port in the UAE, as a transit port. So Qatar-bound bigger container ships used to first arrive at Jebel Ali port, and then the containers used to be re-exported to Qatar on smaller feeder ships. And within 5 days of the blockade, Qatar entered into an agreement with Oman to use its Sohar port in the north and Salah port in the south as transit ports instead of Jebel Ali port. Furthermore, smaller container ships from India, China, Pakistan, and Iran started arriving at Hamad port of Qatar directly. Construction of Hamad port, which is Qatar's main seaport, began in 2010. It became operational in December 2016. To its luck, within 3 months of the blockade, the port was officially opened. Spread over 28.5 square kilometers, the port's basin is 4 kilometers long, 700 meters wide, and 17 meters deep, which enabled it to receive even the world's biggest ships. Qatar's next goal was to achieve self-sufficiency in food sector. Prior to the blockade, Qatar was almost entirely dependent on Saudi Arabia for its dairy products. Qatari businessman Motaz Al Kayot saw dairy sector in Qatar having a lot of potential, and within 5 weeks of the blockade, his firm Power International airlifted 3,400 Holstein cows from the US and Europe on Qatari Airways cargo planes. The cows were brought to the farm operated by Power International's subsidiary Boldona Farm. Spread over 2.4 million square meters, the farm is located in the middle of a desert at a distance of around 55 kilometers from Qatar's capital city, Doha. But the desert is not a natural environment for these cows. The outside temperature can hit 48 degrees Celsius sometimes, so they must be kept indoors at temperature around 15 degrees Celsius than the outside air. Each dairy cow requires an average of 185 gallons of water a day, twice the volume used by the average Qatari household. The majority of this water comes from oil or gas-powered desalination plants. Maintaining a dairy farm in Qatar is never an easy task, but advanced technologies of today have made things a lot easier. Currently, the Boldona farm has around 40 state-of-the-art barns and is now home to 22,000 cows. All the barns are equipped with misting and cooling systems to keep the summer temperature at roughly 28 degrees Celsius, well below the brutal 43 degrees Celsius outside. The cows are milked thrice a day with the help of advanced rotary milking systems. Boldona has a current capacity to produce 700,000 to 900,000 liters of beverages per day. About 80% of the farm's output is enough to meet domestic Qatari demand, with the rest exported. And in just 20 months after the blockade, the Boldona farm started exporting milk to Oman, Yemen and Afghanistan. The journey of Qatar from importing almost all its dairy products at a time to exporting dairy products to other countries now, Qatar has shown remarkable progress. And to showcase this remarkable journey of Qatar and Boldona Farm's astonishing rise, the farm is open to the public. The visitors can see the farm's misting, cooling and milking systems, including the cows. There is also a special theater-like section for visitors to watch a short film of about 4 minutes and 45 seconds, playing on loop, narrated in Arabic and subtitled in English. The video includes dramatic music set alongside stunning images of Qatar's natural environment, its people, various aspects of Qatari culture and heritage, as well as images of the farm's high-tech facilities and the milk cows. Boldona Farm is not just a farm to Qatari people. It has now become a national icon which celebrates the spirit and determination of Qatari people and is a testament to Qatar's victory over the blockade. Rallying behind this nationalist pride, Qatar's royal family has strengthened its legitimacy to rule and is politically stronger now than ever before. Agriculture in Qatar is inherently limited in scope due to its harsh, arid climate, water scarcity, and lack of arable land. Despite such challenges, Qatar has made impressive progress towards self-sufficiency in vegetable production. Qatar's vegetable production grew to 74,000 tons in 2019 from 55,000 tons in 2017, achieving a 27% self-sufficiency. Likewise, Qatar has achieved 124% self-sufficiency in fresh chicken and 74% self-sufficiency in fresh fish. The annual Global Food Security Index 2019 by the Economist Intelligence Unit put Qatar on the first position among Arab countries. and on 13th position among 113 countries across the world. About 80% of Qatar's exports comprise of petroleum-related products and liquefied natural gas, or LNG, out of which only LNG accounts for 62% of its export revenues. Unlike its Arab neighbors, Qatar exports most of its natural gas as LNG on ships or tankers instead of exporting through pipelines. Qatar is the world's largest LNG producer, which was also the first country to export natural gas as LNG, and this has made Qatar to traditionally invest more in LNG infrastructure and logistics. Since it exported almost all of its natural gas as LNG when the blockade on Qatar came into effect, it wasn't able to affect Qatar's LNG exports much. However, Qatar exports natural gas to UAE and Oman through a pipeline from its giant North Field. That pipeline, which is known as Dolphin Gas Pipeline, pumps around 2 billion cubic feet of gas per day to the UAE, which is why it is the largest energy-related venture in the entire Gulf Arab region. The Dolphin Gas Pipeline is critical to UAE's energy security, so much so that UAE generates half of its power from the natural gas of this pipeline, which is why, despite the much publicized blockade, UAE didn't stop buying natural gas from Qatar, and Qatar's LNG exports wasn't affected during the entire blockade period. Saudi Arabia and the UAE had also considered options to invade Qatar, much like what Saddam Hussein's Iraq did with Kuwait in 1990. But due to Turkey's military support to Qatar and US diplomatic pressure, the plan to invade Qatar was aborted. Had they done so, Qatar's relatively small armed forces would not likely have been able to withstand for long. At that time, Qatari Air Force, which only had 12 French-built Dassault Mirage 2000S jet fighters alongside 6 Alpha jet light attack aircraft, would not have stood a chance against the larger fleets of advanced F-15 and F-16s flown by Saudi and Emirati Air Force. On the other hand, Qatari Army's 30-old French-built AMX-30 tanks would not have been able to withstand against more advanced US-built Saudi M1 Abrams and French-built Emirati Leclerc main battle tanks. But since the beginning of the blockade, Qatar has invested heavily in its armed forces and now has a much stronger military. Qatari Air Force now has French-built 4.5 generation Dassault Rafale multi-role fighter jets, alongside C-17 and C-130 transport planes and AH-64 Apache helicopter gunships. The Qatari Air Force will soon induct F-15QA, F-15E Strike Eagle and Eurofighter Typhoon aircrafts to its fleet. On the other side, Qatari Army now has the Leopard 2A 7+ main battle tanks, the PZH 2000 155mm self-propelled howitzer contract armored, Dingo 2HD 4x4 armored vehicle, and Fennec 4x4 light reconnaissance armored vehicle. Despite all the progress Qatar has made, it has also suffered in some sectors because of the blockade. Qatar's national airline, Qatar Airways, might be the one that suffered the most. Prior to the blockade, the airline was operating hundreds of flights to 18 cities of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt, including 20 flights per day to Dubai in each direction. And in addition to that, due to the restriction on flying over their airspace, the airline had to take circuitous route, which meant burning unnecessary fuel and wasting passengers' time. Take, for example, Qatar Airways Flight 1427, which connects Doha to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Before the blockade, the flight used to fly over Saudi Arabia to get to Addis Ababa. But due to the restriction, the flight had to fly over Persian Gulf, then around the UAE, and then over Oman to get to Addis Ababa. And this has forced Qatar Airways to incur losses of hundreds of millions of dollars. So much so, the airline reported a whopping loss of $649 million in the financial year 2018 to 2019. However, 3.5 years later, none of the demands made by the blockading countries got fulfilled. Qatar didn't shut down the Al Jazeera network, it didn't close down Turkish military base, it didn't cut ties with Iran. Instead, Qatar became militarily, economically, and politically more powerful. If you liked this video, then hit the like button and consider subscribing to Very Well Informed. Thanks for watching.